How are you guys? Welcome back to Wargaming China, and we're back here at Jiangyin, and I thought I'd give you a little bit of an after action report. The game's finished. It was a cracking game, and it was a Japanese loss. Yes indeed, by the end of turn 12 the Chinese guns Jiangyin we're still firing. So how did this happen? Well, at the start of the game, the Chinese had 5 8-figure infantry companies, 2 pom-pom guns and 1 auto cannon, with 2 medium machine guns, for a total of about 80 odd figures. The Japanese Navy were attacking here in my scenario with 1 battalion landing here and advancing to seize the guns, and the right hand side of the Jiangyin naval base. The other Japanese forces, consisting of a battalion of the SNLF, Special Naval Landing Forces, and a battalion of Japanese Naval Landing Forces, the Imperial Japanese Naval Landing Forces were to breach a hole in the scuttled ships and force their way through the minefield using this ship, but it took some time. Although their landings were successful here, fierce resistance by Chinese naval forces fighting as infantry resulted in a very slow and costly advance for the Japanese. Now you're looking at these, and these are Japanese infantry, and this was a naval engagement only, but during a large game I do like to have a visual difference between the forces, because the army was never here, because most of you would think, but it's a river obstacle, it can be outflanked by land forces. The army have taken Shanghai, they just have to take this from the rear. Well, the army weren't interested in taking Jiangyin from the rear, because that would help the navy in the race to Nanjing. So that this was a naval operation, and I only have army figures there, infantry figures there, as a visual difference between the forces involved. Now, the first 4 turns of this, the Japanese had concentrated air power, and they were designated it for 6 turns, and most of it they used to destroy the Chinese ship that was deployed here, that they sank, with its 2 4.7-inch guns and twin Bofors. So the Japanese Air Force, the Japanese Naval Air Force, concentrated so much effort on the shipping that it had 2 strikes, 1 strike on an already sunken ship. So this meant that the guns themselves were still active by the time the Japanese air attacks were over. Now, this is another thing about Jiangyin. Although I used a Nell bomber and an A5N, the Nell bomber would have taken part in this battle, but not the A5N. It wasn't quite in service for this battle. This late December onwards. But needs must when the devil drives. So, having focused perhaps far too much attention on the sinking of the ship, the Chinese ship, the Japanese hadn't focused enough on the guns. However, because there was no central fire control system for the guns, the only gun that I allowed to oppose the initial landing was this gun. So I'll move that lighthouse. And it failed to support the infantry at all. It used all its firepower against the Japanese shipping. Now the Japanese, I think, didn't win this battle. One of the factors they didn't win this battle was the, as I said, not focusing enough air power on the guns themselves. But another thing was there was far too much dilly-dallying among the Japanese crew, various crew captains, and the amphibious assault did not end up as coordinated as it should have. And indeed, there were many factors that I threw into this game. Now, I did give the Japanese a big corvette type ship, and it being a big ship, it was of course a big target. Now this ship was carrying the larger part of the Japanese naval landing forces, and it was every time a Japanese ship moved on this side of the scuttled ships, they had to roll a d20, and if it hit a 1, it hit a mine. And the only ship that hit a mine was the big corvette, and it hit 2 mines during the course of the game. Then, as the Sokutais took over the advance, because both times she was hitting the engine just by mines, they could only lay down smoke against the larger guns. And although they were effective at close-in fire support against the Chinese infantry, they lacked the firepower to engage their larger guns properly. And had this ship come through, well, the problem was that the Sokutais had to escort the landing craft to their beaches. Now, in order to do this, the corvette was left behind crippled, and their smoke stream drifted away because it was defending and covering the landing forces. This left it open to the Chinese artillery, and it received, over the course of 2 turns, multiple hits. And then in turn 7, it was again hit by multiple heavy shells. So that was the end of her, and I wrote off the landing forces she was carrying, because she was supposed to dock here and disembark the troops directly and seize the facilities. Now, when it came to moving the ships, I've rigged up my own model, and I decided it would take 3 turns, 1 to contact and 2 to move aside or clear a ship, a scuttled ship, and 1 full turn in the minefield to clear a lane. So having done that, the ship was crippled again. This ship was a target for the Chinese guns. The Sokutais did a good job of covering the assault with their smoke, but when the Japanese eventually got to landing here, their hard guy disembarked and was immediately hit by the 150mm gun and immediately destroyed. The Chinese infantry along with the pom-pom gun in this building had sat patiently throughout the battle and not fired a shot, and had not been observed. So this pom-pom here played a key part in the battle, because by the time the Japanese infantry had advanced and seized the first gun, they had set themselves, they were very low, they were very close to a morale count. Having gone down the hill to cross the stream, they ran in at close range to the pom-pom gun and a company of infantry in this building here, and were cut down. And that resulted in a morale roll which they failed. Now, a morale roll for the Japanese infantry in 1937 is not quite the same as a morale roll for the Japanese infantry in 1944 on a Pacific island. So they went to ground. They were peppered, continually peppered with more rounds, and could take no further part in the battle. So by the time the Japanese forces got to this beach here, the battalion of SNLF with 2 tanks in support and a 75mm mountain gun. The first mistake the Japanese had made is having only cleared one lane in the minefield. It meant that their landing craft, the first landing craft, landed on its own, piecemeal, and was immediately engaged, and its occupants wiped out by close range fire. And then the next 2 ships got the Japanese Sokotais did manage to give good close-up fire support along this ridge, but there was 2 reasons they were doing that. If they could duck in close enough to that ridge, they'd be out of visual sight of the guns of Jiangyin. So after 12 turns, Chinese victory, or Chinese still hold Jiangyin Huang Mountain, and they still hold the naval base. So we have to put that down as a Chinese victory. And if I were to play this game again, there'd be no palm trees on the table. Were I to play this game again, there would be no palm trees on the table, because there were no palm trees here. It was all like coniferous trees. Although the mountain itself was quite well forested, the hills around the base I would call openly forested. And I took another liberty with using this lane, the approach from Wushan, for 1/4 of the battle, and I did that to conserve table space. It was a great game. I put a lot of effort into this, building all the ships and doing the reading and looking things up, and it was very good game, very close battle. Went down to the last turn, and that's how a good game should always be. As I said, if I was to play this game again, I would perhaps reduce the effectiveness again of the Chinese guns, because perhaps I was too generous with them, given how much the gun's performance would have been hampered by the lack of equipment. So perhaps I was too generous with the Chinese coastal guns. But with the Chinese infantry, Chinese naval force, I just played them as regular infantry, and they did very well indeed. Very well indeed. So I use rapid fire for the rules, and usually the rules I use personally were rapid fire is the basis of them. But for war in China, I have what's the word? Cobbled stuff together using those rules. I don't know what the word is. Adapted the rules. That's the word. So there we go. The guns at Jiangyin were still firing at the end of turn 12. The Japanese were ashore, but no hope of going anywhere. And the most important parts of the battle were the pom-pom breaking up the Japanese infantry trying to cross the stream, and the sinking of the Japanese corvette with the assault force on it. Alright then, that's Jiangyin. Can't think of anything I missed. If you like that, press subscribe. Hit like anyway, even if you didn't like it. See ya.